I just want to quickly skip over to our virtual panel now and speak with the chairman of the Governors Forum, Governor Fayemi, because a lot of this affects the governors in their different states. When we were looking at those at the statistics, particularly the map, we know that in terms of the VAPP, which is the Violence Against Persons Prohibition Act, Ekiti is one of those states that has actually passed that. What are you hearing from your colleagues, if at all, about the difficulty they're having just getting this through in their various states?
Thank you, Ijoma, for inviting me, and I want to thank the UN Spotlight Initiative and the Honourable Minister for those remarks. Well, for us as governors, there is consensus that we should have a zero tolerance against all forms of violence against women and children. And that's why we declared a state of emergency earlier on this year against gender-based violence and sexual violence of all forms. Yes, there may be challenges of culture, challenges of tradition that we're experiencing in a variety of places, but the policy position of governors is that we must use a number of mechanisms. One is law reform, and you talked about the VAPP, Violence Against All Persons Prohibition Act. We are also reforming aspects of our criminal code and the penal code, particularly in the northern part of the country, where some of these laws have not yet been adopted, to take cognizance of the need to deal with sexual violence. 3, it's not enough to enact laws or to reform our laws. Enforcement of the law is critical. And that's why the example the Honourable Minister gave you of what we did in Ekiti when we started the Sexual Offenders Register in 2013 has now morphed into what we call a naming and shaming policy. So it's not enough to have a register. When you are convicted in Ekiti of rape or any sexual violence offense, we take this to your community. We paste it in local languages in that community, that this person who comes from this community has brought shame to the family and to the community. And this is pasted all over that community. And you know what that means in our local setting. We don't stop there. We also have a policy in which if you have been convicted of any sexual violence crime in Ekiti, you will not benefit from the prerogative of mercy, which of course, you know, governors naturally give to people who have either spent some time in jail and they seem to have shown remorse in Ekiti. If your offense is sexual violence related, you will not benefit from my prerogative of mercy. And this is also something that we're bringing to the fore at the level of the Governors Forum. 4 is, for us, protection of the victim is very critical. And that is why we have a sexual assault referral center in Ekiti, the Moremi Clinic, and also we have shelters for those who have suffered from domestic violence. But sexual violence is not just something you suffer from a stranger. It could also happen within the family. So you need to protect people from that. But much more importantly for us as governors, we do not delink the role of power relations. Poverty has some connection to sexual violence. And when people are poor, it is easy to manipulate them. It is easy to perpetrate all forms of sexual violence offenses against them. So for us, empowerment of women and the girl child is very critical, not just by stipends and handouts, but by ensuring that girls go to school. And this is also a critical issue that my colleagues are promoting in the North. So for us as governors, these are the 5 areas that we're focusing our attention on.
Okay, sorry to have to cut in there. I know I'm going to talk to the Deputy Senate President in a minute because a lot of this involves legislation. But one more thing I want to take you up on, Governor Fayemi, really, is how serious you and your colleagues are taking the whole Child Rights Act issue. When you look at the defilement figures going up daily, 77% of the people who walk into essential service centers are children, and they are minors. And when you look at only about 11 states adopting the Child Rights Act, what can you do at that level? What sort of, shall I say, pressure do you think you can put on your colleagues to have that act passed within, or let's say domesticated at state level before we move on?
Clearly, for my colleagues, I can tell you that this is an issue that every single governor is taking seriously. The state of emergency that we declared is collective. It's not just Governor Fayemi as chairman declaring this. The second way in which we are tackling this challenge is via the wives of governors. Our wives are actively involved in a coalition against gender-based violence, and they are also campaigning across the length and breadth of this country on issues of Child Rights Act and child rights protection. I mentioned culture and tradition earlier. It's true. In some religions and traditional setting, the definition of who a child is may not be as clear as we would like it to be. But the way we've resolved that at the level of the Governors Forum is to ensure that every girl child must compulsorily be educated right up to senior secondary school 3. That is what my colleagues all over the country have adopted. Of course, that's policy. It doesn't necessarily mean that that is happening across the board yet, but there is a commitment on the part of governors to do this. And governors are also working on the penal code in the northern part of the country. You would have seen in Kaduna State, for example, just last week, the First Lady of Kaduna and the governor have already put this before the Kaduna State House of Assembly, a review of the penal code. So those are the kind of steps being taken in order to address what you have just mentioned.